let me introduce you to Juhis. He's a developer community builder a web developer and programming teacher from Helsinki, Finland, where it is 3 a.m. When he's on a computer, he works on all parts of the stack from the back end to the front end. When he's not on a computer, he's passionate about making tech a welcoming industry for everyone. Take it away, Juhis.
Thanks, Brooks. And once again, the classic. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir.
Good. Awesome. So, I'm here to talk about learning Rust. And it was super nice to hear before we went live that we have all sorts of people joining the event. Some who have recently started learning, some who have been working with Rust for a while. And I hope that for those of you who are just starting with Rust, I hope to give kind of hope and kind of like the peer experience of the things that I've struggled with, but also the things that I've enjoyed. And if you're a more experienced developer and more experienced Rustasian, I hope that this will give you new insights as well into maybe you're mentoring juniors in your team, maybe you're writing documentation for libraries. I think it's always good to get some ideas from people new to the language, new to the ecosystem. And maybe most importantly, I'm gonna talk about things that I find difficult or things that I don't enjoy that much. But it is not to say that I wish those things would be different in Rust. So this talk is by no means going to be kind of a negative talk about Rust. It's just the things that I've experienced, and I try to kind of be as open as possible about those things. Couple of words about myself. Like Brooks mentioned, I'm joining from Helsinki, Finland. The sun is rising up. It's 3:30 in the morning. And sorry, I've never been to Denver. I used to live in San Francisco. But if there are any hockey fans from the Colorado area, I was really rooting for the Colorado Avalanche. Mikko Rantanen, who's from the same town as I am, is playing in the Avalanche, and I've been a big fan of them for quite a while. During the day, I'm a developer advocate at a European company called Futuris. We're a software and design consultancy. And during night, like right now, I also build developer communities. I run a meetup like this one for front-end developers. And I run a couple of other communities. I have a YouTube show. I tweet, I blog. I try to provide a lot of content, especially helping people learn about technology, software development, and so on. So a little bit of my background. I've been coding for the past like 15, 20 years, but I've mostly been working with Python and JavaScript. And compared to those, Rust is quite a different language. Like, the things that I really like about Python and JavaScript is the kind of ease of use, the developer experience, the fact that they are interpreted languages. They're quite straightforward, dynamically typed. Those are all things that I really, really enjoy in a programming language. So when I jumped to Rust, I've had to learn a lot of new things. But it's been a good experience. And it's been definitely an eye-opening experience. And I'm a strong believer that we always should kind of expand beyond the day-to-day technologies that we use. I sorry. So originally, I learned about Rust a couple of years ago. It was kind of popping on the radar. There were some people interested in it, but I didn't pay a lot of attention. Until Python Estonia in 2019. I was doing a talk about different topic, and I met Dom, who was doing a talk about Rust with Python. And that talk kind of got me excited about Rust. Dom is a fantastic speaker. You can find the talk from the slides. And since I was using Python a lot, I figured this would be a nice way to also get started with Rust myself. And this was October of 2019. And then it took a while. I didn't start learning Rust immediately. I didn't jump right into the language and start building things. As a software developer and community builder, there's a lot happening. A lot of things to build, events to participate, talks to give. And then there was the pandemic. So Rust was kind of set aside, waiting for a better moment. And that moment was December of 2020. A little bit over 12 months after the PyCon. And I started with Advent of Code, which is this Advent calendar every year where you get some puzzles every day and you need to solve them by writing some code. And I've always used that to refresh my memory with old languages, to learn new stuff. And it was the perfect moment to get started with Rust. I wrote some of my first Rust code. It was really difficult to balance between solving the puzzles and learning a completely new language when the compiler was telling me that I'm doing things wrong all the time. I wrote a couple of blog posts each week about my progress, about the things that I was experiencing, the things that I was learning. And I think that gave me the boost that I needed to really get started with the language. Because when I started to write about it, and when I started to share my journey, the Rust community got involved and started to help me out, learn the language, get through the puzzles. I think I made it through like day 8 or day 9, which is my record with the AOC. But it was not an easy month. I had a lot of trouble with Rust and with the puzzles. So then a little bit later, in January of 2021, I decided to start to build a real tool. Instead of just focusing on solving like programming puzzles, I figured that I would get the best experience by actually building something that I would use myself and something that other people would use day to day. And like I mentioned, I'm a big NHL fan. So I decided to build a tool that gives me the NHL results on the command line. And because of the time zones, I usually check them in the morning because the games are played in the middle of the night. And that app is called 235, and you can find it on crates or as a binary from GitHub. And you can see on the screen what the output of that looks like. It ended up being a really good project because the scope was quite small. The design was simple and kind of fixed, but it was still a real life project that I've been using every day for the past months. Which brings me to a couple of things that I want to share today. Some of these things are things that I really like about Rust, and some of them are things that I struggle with, things that I don't like so much, and things that I hope to learn to become better with as time goes on. And this is something I already mentioned before the talk, that pattern matching is something I absolutely love. It's by far the favorite feature in Rust. For those who are not familiar, this is what pattern matching looks like. It's kind of an evolved if-else clause, where you match some variable into different arms of the pattern matching. So in this case, when I print the individual lines, it's possible that both of the teams have scored. It's possible that only the home team has scored, or that only the away team has scored. And the reason I like this so much is that it is so elegant, it is so beautiful, and to me, it is super intuitive. I've been using it too much. I know that there's some pieces of code in my code base that could be an if-else clause, but since I'm learning new things, I've been using match and pattern matching for a lot of things. And one of the things that it kind of matches really nicely is with the option at the result type of Rust language, where you kind of don't have to check if something is null in other languages. And you never have to worry about those cases, because the pattern matching forces you to be exhaustive. You need to go through all the different cases that are possible. And when used in a kind of concise manner, I think it's a really nice, easy to read, easy to follow. It takes a bit to learn if you're new to it, but I think that once you learn it, it becomes a really nice and elegant piece of writing code. And one thing I'm super excited about is that it's coming to Python. In Python 3.10, which comes out in October this year, we are getting pattern matching as well. It's a little bit different from Rust because of the lack of strong typing or a static typing and certain structures that the typing system of Rust gives. But I think it's a step to the better direction. I've been geeking out about it since February or March when I first heard about it. So pattern matching is something I absolutely love. My favorite thing. Which brings me to something that I do struggle with. And also something that I don't enjoy that much, which is static typing. When I was studying at the university a decade ago, we were learning Java, and one of the things I absolutely didn't like about Java was the static typing and how verbose it was. You had to be constantly writing all the types out. I think with Java these days, it's gotten better with inference of types. Rust is really nice in terms of that. I don't have to define each variable. If it's clear from, let's say, a function call, what the end result is. But one place where it really kind of bothers me, and this is something where I want to emphasize that I do understand the value of strong static typing. I'm just not a fan of it as a developer when I'm typing the code. And the thing that I don't like much. I can give names to everything, even when I don't need the names. I've been writing a bit of TypeScript lately, and one of the cool things you can do with TypeScript is you can basically do something like this, where now the date is basically just an anonymous struct. And I've been reading a bit about the discussion in the Rust community about anonymous structs, and there seems to be quite a divide on whether they should exist or not, and how feasible they are. So I'm not gonna kind of take any sides in that battle. I'm not, like, I don't have a strong opinion when it comes to the Rust itself. But this is something that I often feel that is a little bit kind of annoying, a little bit extraneous to write. When I just want to say that, okay, this one thing is a struct. I don't need to give it a name. But then Rust makes me do that. It's, in the end, it's a small thing. But it's one of those things I escaped from Java into Python and JavaScript a decade ago. Because with those languages I can just type things and they are dynamically typed. The second thing that I've become a fan of, and this is something I haven't used that much because I've been building just a command line tool, like a binary that gets run, rather than libraries. But I'm a big fan of the design of Rust doc and documentation tests. I've been doing a bunch of talks about the importance of documentation. And documentation is something really close to my heart. It's something that I think we undervalue in the industry. And we should be doing more. And the thing I love about it in Rust is that it brings it really close to the code. But it also makes it kind of programmatic in a way. Let's take a look at an example. So this is a modified example from the Rust doc book, or Rust by example, either one of those. Both really good resources. But here we have an implementation of a struct, and with these triple forward slashes, we define the Rust doc, the documentation that we can generate. We can add markdown, we can add examples with code blocks. And this is something you can do with pretty much any language. But what makes this really cool is that the code blocks are actually runnable. So you can guarantee that all of your examples that are generated from your code comments into the documentation will always run correctly. You can, at the same time, educate the user, and you can make sure that the code is correct. One argument against the code comments that I often hear is that they easily go out of date and they become stale, and that's a problem. But I think this is a really good example of how we can kind of battle both of them. And it's a brilliant design choice, because it then encourages you to write examples and to write the documentation where the code lives. And then the second thing that I don't like, maybe is the right, or maybe that I'm not good enough with yet, that I struggle with. And this is something I knew when I got into Rust. Back in university I did a class on C and C++. And these are the same kind of things that I struggled with. As a Python and JavaScript developer, I can just pass variables to functions, and then it never complains to me. But with Rust, there's so many things that, whether it's about ownership, borrowing something, the lifetime of variables, passing by reference, these are all things that I constantly trip when I'm doing things. And the weird thing is that when I read about them, I feel like I understand. But when I open the code editor and I start writing the code, I'm in trouble all the time. I recently participated in a Rust Lab meetup a couple of weeks ago, where Nell Shamrell Harrington gave a great talk about the borrow checker. That it helps you figure out if you're making mistakes with those things. And while I was watching it, I was nodding along. I was like, yes, makes total sense. But for some reason, I'm not still comfortable enough. I don't have the routine of dealing with these things. That whenever I make some bug fixes or new features, there's always a couple of things that I trip to. So here's one example of one of my Advent of Code codes that I kind of recreated the bug for this presentation. And I tried to pass a vector to two different functions. And the compiler started complaining that you cannot do that. You've moved the value, which is something that in Python and JavaScript I don't do. That's not a concept. So there's been a lot to learn. But I think it was Brooks or somebody else who mentioned before the talk that the compiler is actually quite nice with Rust. And in December I wrote this quote in my blog post that the compiler, the way it's written, is so nice that when you're in a stressful situation where the code doesn't work, it's kind and it helps you, not just telling that you're wrong, but it's telling you how to fix things. And I think that is something I do like about Rust once again. It has one of the best compiler messages and errors that I've ever seen. Helm is another language that I like because of its errors. They are written by humans to humans, not to computers, but to other people. And they're kind of, hey, it's okay. You made a mistake. Let's fix it. It's not the end of the world. And I think that sentimentality really helps, especially at the beginning, and especially during stressful things. And then the third thing that I struggle with, and I even struggled to write about this, or kind of how to phrase this, because it's difficult for me to come up with examples. So I'll try to explain what I mean. I feel that as a beginner, there's a lot of cases where I'm inside the stack. Let's say that I'm 3 functions deep. And then I figure out that I need to do something that might return a result. Maybe it's a question mark after accessing an option, something like that. And to me it feels that I need to do a lot of things kind of up the chain. I need to change quite a lot of things, like the return values, the way those are handled People like you, people in the community, who are always open to help. They're open to share. I've gotten so much help from the local Rust community in Finland, in Twitter, on global scale. And having the opportunity to come here today and share the things that I've been learning and struggling with, it's awesome. It's really great. So I'm really thankful that the community is so open. But it's also that the community is so much fun. I love Ferris, the Rustasian, the mascot that you've been seeing on the slides. I love the whimsicality of the community. I was just today looking at the Rust Foundation Board of Directors page. And when you hover over the faces, you can see pictures of the mascot that each one of them drew. And they all look a little bit different. And that is what the Rust community and the Rustasians are for me. So I'm really happy that I found the community and that I found the ecosystem and the language. And I'm really happy that I've gotten the opportunity to also share forward the things that I've been learning and the things that I've discovered. So a couple of things before the end. I'm writing a blog post series called Learning Rust. It's not a tutorial. It's more about me writing down things as I learn them. I've now written 5 of them. I publish one on the first Wednesday of each month. And it's been a really great way for me to improve my Rust, to learn, and to get feedback from the community. So if you're interested in reading those and seeing a little bit more about what I've been learning, you can find those on my blog. And the second thing that I think might be of interest, I run a live stream YouTube show called Codebase, which is a developer community show. Each month I invite a guest from a different community, whether it's accessibility, Clojure, PHP, web components, Python, Rust. I invite different people who know something that I don't. And then for 90 minutes we talk about technology, we live code something. And my attempt with that is, like I mentioned in the beginning, is to give people exposure to languages and technologies that you might not use on a day-to-day basis. It's streamed at 5 p.m. Helsinki time, so it's morning in Denver. But you can also find them later on YouTube if you don't want to join live. Huge thanks for Brooks for giving me the opportunity to join. If you have any questions or comments or want to participate in the discussion, more than happy to do that. If you want to follow me or find more about me, you can find me on Twitter